All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining today's session on the state of content. I see some folks trickling in, but I think in the spirit of time here, we're going to jump right in, and we'll be sure to distribute the recording here after the fact. My name is Anthony Iosa. I lead product marketing and content marketing here at Welcome. For those that are a little unfamiliar, Welcome's a content marketing platform and a digital asset management tool. So our software helps marketing teams plan campaigns, create content, store assets, distribute it to all your downstream channels, and measure the results. A little bit more about that later. Most importantly, star of today's show is research extraordinaire, which I don't think that's an overstatement, Jeff, but you can humbly keep me in check here, but also good friend, Jeff Sirkin of Sirkin Research. Jeff, you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Anthony. Very kind of you to say, but yeah, fundamentally, we help our clients keep their finger on the pulse of their market through research studies like this. And I'm super excited to dig into the data here.
Awesome. So, yep, as far as that data, we're super excited to be here today. Jeff and I, Welcome and Sirkin together. We've actually partnered on a number of different surveys over the last couple of years. For those of you who have been following Welcome, you may have seen our State of Marketing 2020 and 2021. This year, we took a slightly different approach, and we really wanted to dig into the content lifecycle, specifically to understand what challenges get in the way of marketing teams planning, producing, and measuring their content. So I think we're gonna keep it short and sweet today. Jeff's gonna lead us through a lot of those key insights that we uncovered. I'll share some best practices to help offset some of those challenges, and then we'll close out with some of your questions. So please be sure to throw those into the Q&A, and we will monitor those as we go. Really quick, just to start off with some key trends and give you some context behind why we administered this survey in late December, early January. The first is that today it's really all about business growth. CMOs, marketing leaders, content leaders such as yourself, everyone's driven by outcomes. And the teams that can demonstrate that they impact growth on the business separate themselves from the pack, and and those brands are the ones that will surface to the top. The second is that we all are swamped. We all need to be more efficient, more agile, and speed to market is critical, right? But to optimize all of our campaigns, we need to be able to collaborate faster, use data, and that starts and ends with bringing content, workflow, all of our data together to help achieve the goals that we're all after. The third is that, companies today aren't just data-driven, they're scientific. So, we really need to be smart about creating the right content for the right audience at the right time. And we need to be able to find and surface those insights to iteratively improve. And the last is that the MarTech stack is complex and unwieldy. I think we all know and feel that as modern marketers. We're all using multiple tools, disparate tools, and that makes execution all the more challenging. So with that context in mind, we administered the State of Content survey in, I want to say, late December, early January. Our goal was to explore the maturity of content operations for various marketing teams. We targeted a range of marketing personas, each with some element of content, right? So not just content, traditional content marketing teams and content operations professionals, but digital marketers, web marketers, product marketers, any marketing persona where content creation is at the core of what they do. We targeted directors and above across a variety of verticals, and we were skewed a little bit more towards, the enterprise and upper mid-market organizations. So, slightly larger teams. And the results you'll see are from about 140 respondents. So with that, Jeff, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing here, and this shouldn't be a big surprise, but the growing importance of content. And so obviously we're seeing it in terms of headcount. So 76% say their organization is increasing headcount, as well as their spend on technology. And of course, this makes sense because more than ever with the buyer's journey being digital, content truly is the currency. And so it makes sense that we're seeing organizations make it a bigger priority as we move forward. And the biggest piece within there, and I'm going to turn it back over to Anthony in a second, is looking at how people self-identify in terms of their level of sophistication. And so these are the categories we created. But Anthony, I'd love for you to give some context on these.
Yeah, for sure. So I think this was like a really interesting component or element of the survey itself, right? Because our main goal, as I alluded to, was to identify the challenges that we're all feeling and facing in the context of the content lifecycle. But we also want to benchmark those responses and find correlation between them, right? So in other words, why would one person or one team be burdened by one thing, but another person or team might be burdened by another thing? And so we asked our survey respondents to classify themselves into one of these four maturity levels or one of these four buckets. The first, moving left to right, is, the first is ad hoc. So they don't have any formal processes, maybe content productions kind of happening ad hoc or by request. And there's no real strategy or content foundation in place. As you move to the right, you move into the emerging category where you're starting to coordinate content campaigns and initiatives across maybe multiple teams, but you're not really leveraging technology in the most effective way possible. As you move to established, you are starting to structure yourself around processes. Maybe you're centralizing where that work happens. You're becoming more coordinated, and you've started to invest in a tool or set of tools to help you do that. And then ultimately advanced, where, ultimately this is where we want to get everyone, right? This is where you have technology working as a competitive advantage. It's helping to facilitate the work that you're doing. And you're able to demonstrate the value of your content to leadership teams.
Awesome. And so in terms of where organizations fall on the spectrum, I mean, we see a bit of a bell curve distribution, as you'll see here. And so while content is a big and growing priority, only 14% self-identified as being advanced today. So that kind of brings up two questions. First of all, where are the opportunities for improvement? And the other big question that we're going to dig into in a second is what makes you advanced? What are the things that separate the advanced from the established and the emerging? And we saw that such a small number were advanced today. So we went back through the tools, the technologies they use, the priorities, the processes in place, headcount, external spend. We looked across all of it to see really what was driving that. So the first thing we looked at was the technology they used. And so of all the tools an organization could have, having a content performance and recommendation analytics tool really stood clearly ahead of the pack. And so while only 47% of advanced organizations had the tool in place, having it more than doubles the likelihood of being advanced. And so this makes a ton of sense to me, because having visibility for how your content is performing is a critical part of that well-oiled machine. And using those insights to continually improve your content is a major part of what it means to be advanced. So next, we looked at what the organizations prioritize that correlates with being more advanced. And the focus on delivering a consistent experience across channels was most important. And if you're taking the time and effort to focus on all the little details, then it means you have the building blocks to do this in place, or in place to do this well. And again, I could see this being more of a sign that you are already advanced as opposed to something you can do to get there. But at the same time, it still has a more than a 2.5 times likelihood of being advanced for those who prioritize it. And the next one, I have to admit, this is my favorite. I mentioned having the building blocks in place to create a sophisticated content engine. And I don't think there's anything that fits the idea more than documenting workflows and processes. And the reason I love this is because it seems so beautifully simple. And it's something organizations can make a commitment to do today. So documenting those workflows and processes show that you're ready to build a repeatable machine. And if you aren't doing it today, that's a lot of times when you're likely getting caught up in the work about work instead of keeping your eyes on the prize. So we asked about a number of different pain points of marketers within the content lifecycle across a few different categories, and we'll dig into each of those components of the categories in a minute. But first, just wanted to share sort of overall within each category themselves. It was pretty clear from the data that the part of the lifecycle companies struggle with most frequently is measuring their content. And again, it's interesting to me because in theory, the cycle starts with planning, then production, then governance, and measurement is last in terms of timeline. But I think it makes a ton of sense because it's that last step of doing the analytics that then influences what gets changed as the process runs again, because this is obviously a continuum. And so if you don't have those insights, it makes sense that, again, that would be the thing holding people back. So let's dig into that category first. So within it, optimizing for search feels like today, doesn't really seem like much of a challenge. And when we dug in, is the big picture of analytics that there's really a significant amount of pain. So setting the right KPIs, being able to have holistic reporting and visibility across channels. I mean, these really are all the key pillars of content analytics that organizations are struggling with. And it makes sense that these are really the biggest things holding organizations back. When it comes to content production, communicating between teams, accessing subject matter experts, it feels a bit of a breeze. I think we've gotten used to how to work together more effectively virtually over the last couple of years. But the thing that was very challenging was filling the high volume of content. And this comes back to the theme to me of that never-ending hamster wheel, that we're moving as fast as we possibly can, but it feels like it's never enough. And so the demands will always be higher than what we can produce. And as we covered earlier, we don't have the bandwidth to document those workflows or processes, or we don't have the capability of effectively measuring what's working. So again, we sort of end up on this never-ending hamster wheel and things aren't necessarily getting better. When it comes to asset management, we're good about sharing assets with stakeholders. Again, feels like second nature these days. But we certainly have a hard time governing and managing all of the assets created. Again, we're being pulled into that next piece requested. And so this, again, along with measurement, feels similarly around some of the things that we just don't quite have the time for as we have to move on to the next thing to fill that high volume. And then the last category here is around content planning. And I thought it was interesting to see that the easiest item here was coming up with ideas for content. Yet at the same time, we struggle so much on creating content that has this broad appeal. So it seems like we're good at thinking at a really detailed level, but we really struggle to pull it up a level and in a way that might be most relevant to our audience.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Now, obviously our goal is to get everyone, to alleviate a lot of what Jeff just said, right? As we identify those specific challenges at each phase of the life cycle. And we want to move everyone from wherever you may be on that maturity spectrum, from the left all the way to the right in advance. So we're going to very quickly walk through each phase of the life cycle and share some considerations for you about how to optimize your own, content orchestration process. I think in looking at each of the life cycle phases Jeff's discussed, I'd like to start with planning, just order of operations. That is where we all start, even though it was at the bottom of the challenge list. And I think what Jeff said was that we heard people felt content ideation was easy, but that creating content with broad appeal was difficult. And I would actually challenge everyone to think about it a little differently, right? It's not about creating content as generically as possible, but rather it's the opposite. It's about creating specific content that caters to a specific channel or audience. And now that sounds hard to do because you're saying, well, that sounds like more content. And we just heard Jeff say we're already burdened by all of the content fulfillment that we have to do as it is. But a big part of that is actually just visibility and having access to all of the content that your organization is already producing across different teams. So building a content plan, building a content strategy, all of which can and should be centralized on a single calendar and workspace is essential. And it's also essential that all of that is built on a shared taxonomy. So I'd encourage you all to think about how you are tagging, organizing, visualizing the content initiatives that you have in place so that anyone can come in and kind of look at what's happening, pivot the views, find specific activities that may be in motion. You can help amplify or even repurpose it for different audiences. And it's about leveraging a lot of what's already happening. Moving on into the second piece is production. And we heard that fulfilling a high volume of content, is proving to be challenging. And Jeff mentioned the hamster wheel. I can certainly relate to that feeling. But that's exactly why it's really critical to build process and structure into your content production lifecycle. And technology is a big piece of helping to facilitate that. So whether it's new technologies that leverage AI that can actually help you jumpstart your ideation and even your original content creation, or using intelligence just to accelerate the processes behind all of that work. As you start to scale, as you start to have not more cooks in the kitchen, but certainly more stakeholders in the production process, it becomes really critical to have those workflows and those templates to be able to build those repeatable processes that scale. Next is asset management. We heard governance cited as being, the biggest challenge here. Now, candidly, that's fairly ambiguous, right? Governance. I think a reason for that is because a lot of the traditional dams that we're all using as marketers to house our assets are equally ambiguous, right? What modern marketers need today is a fully integrated dam. So think about ways to store, manage, and reuse the assets that you're building today. And those all need to be accessible directly within the workflows that you're already using to plan your campaigns and create your content. It shouldn't be isolated as a disparate tool. You shouldn't be pushing assets into a folder that is never seen or heard from again, right? If your dam is fully integrated into the way that your team is working today and it's made for marketing, those made for marketing dams are purpose built to solve these challenges. And that in turn helps you maximize utilization and maximize the return that you're getting across all of the content that you're producing. And, last but certainly not least is measurement. So obviously, getting the most value out of your content means maximizing each part of that marketing funnel. But in order to do that, you need to be able to look at your content in two ways, regardless of what analytics tools you use, and there are certainly a lot of them out there. But I would say number one is at the asset level, right? Identify how your individual assets are performing from an engagement and an attention time standpoint, right? What's resonating? Is it useful? Is it valuable? Being able to drill into individual pieces of content to assess how useful that asset is critical. And the second piece of that is looking at your content from a buyer journey standpoint, right? So if you can reverse engineer the content journey for your audience, right? Look at what assets they consume before they became customers. That's going to help you optimize that journey going forward for, all of your other, for your entire audience, right? So, with that, three key takeaways today. The first is that investments in technology can certainly help facilitate a lot of what Jeff identified for us earlier on. And obviously, the ability to measure performance is probably the most important. We know it's the biggest pain point. It's been the biggest pain point for a few years now that we've been running this analysis. And as Jeff mentioned, it's really a critical part of that content lifecycle because the content orchestration is an iterative, ongoing, and continuous infinity loop, right? And so being able to measure performance and use those insights to inform the process as it starts all over again is essential. And last but not least is finding purpose-built technology to help you do everything we just talked about, right? And so that brings me to my last point. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing my job as a product marketer if I didn't shamelessly plug Welcome. I think regardless of what tool you choose, it's important that you understand, there are tools out there that can help you facilitate this, which becomes critical as you scale. So Welcome specifically is purpose built to help teams orchestrate that entire content lifecycle. and eliminate a lot of what Jeff talked about earlier on today. With that, I think that's all the slides we have today. Let me see if I can pull up the Q&A here on my single screen. Let me see here. Not pulling up, but oh, here we go. Okay. So Jeff, a couple of follow-ups on the survey results. So number one, were there any organizations that said performance measurement was a challenge they had to overcome? If so, how?
Yeah, so one of the questions we asked that we didn't have a chance to go through in detail is around, similar to the sophistication, we asked them how sophisticated they are with their measurement capabilities. And so we gave them a similar scale, and only 9% of them said excellent, and only 40% said above average. So again, we're really just getting to a place similarly where we have this bell curve distribution, but there's really just so few that are really sort of at the top of their game. So again, I think more than anything else is to recognize that as we all tend to feel that we're behind, the truth is we're not. I mean, that's fundamentally, that's sort of the state of the world we're in.
Yep. Number two, what kinds of, or how many tools are teams using to manage their content operations? I think we asked that in the survey, right?
We did, yeah, and it's funny, you and I were talking about this a little bit before, because it actually kind of lines up with what we've seen over the last couple of years, that there's, they're pretty well packed around, 50% were 2 to 3, another 40%, I believe, was 4 to 6. So everyone's kind of tightly packed. And so some of, obviously, kind of be second half, but the most common tools we see: web analytics, social media, content editors, collaborative calendars, CRM, CMS. Again, it feels like the same, sort of stack that we've been looking at for a while.
Yeah, some mix of that MarTech 9000 landscape, right? Everybody's every organization's a snowflake with a different MarTech mix there. Third one, I think this one's for me. Is there an inflection point where technology becomes more critical, such as number of product lines or revenue? I would say, I think I think technology can help regardless of team size. I'll say that. But I think where you really start to see it become more effective is when you get to the 10 to 15 FTE or content creator, from a headcount standpoint. When you get 10 to 15 folks who are, at their core, looking at the campaigns, collaborating on different campaign concepts, collaborating on the production of those assets, you really start to gain the efficiencies of, that shared visibility and centralizing where a lot of that collaboration is happening. So, Welcome in particular, our freemium offering is available for up to 5 team members for, completely free. I'd encourage anyone to get started. Make use of the calendars, right? I think as rudimentary as it sometimes sounds, a lot, I can't tell you how many marketers I bump into that say, I just have no idea what's going on because we don't have a single shared calendar, or we're using, Excel spreadsheets that become dated as soon as we, minimize the tab, right? So, using technology regardless of team size, I think can help, but you really start to scale when you get into that, dozen plus range. All right, I think last up, what part of the orchestration lifecycle, Jeff, is the most important and or time consuming?
Yeah, so there are 2 different questions we asked. One, we asked around sort of how organizations prioritize strategically, and certainly brought a smile to my face to see that the number 1 strategic priority was research. And interestingly, that actually becomes a bigger priority with orgs as they advance their sophistication. And again, I think that makes sense, that once they have the machine, sort of the well-oiled machine running, that again, it's really more a matter of kind of getting out in front and making sure, back to how do we actually create the right content that's going to resonate? Certainly to me, that always starts and ends with research. And then separately, we did ask in terms of the stages of the life cycle where people are spending their time. And we saw pretty clearly that the 2 biggest were creating content was number 1. 35% of the time essentially was spent on creating the content. And then another 20% on collaboration. So again, those are the biggest chunks of where the time is being consumed within the life cycle. But research, again, which also was actually number 3 and where they're spending the time, but was the number 1 strategic priority.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm going to keep us to our word and keep us within the 30-minute window. I think there were a couple of other questions that handful that we didn't get to, but we will follow up directly with all of you. I think we will also be distributing this recording. So for those who want to check it out a second time, or those who want to watch it on demand, we'll make sure you all get access to it. I do want to thank everyone for joining today, and big shout out to Jeff. As always, super valuable research. I think these insights are making us all better marketers. And so we look forward to bringing you more research, more insights in the near future. So thanks, Jeff. And thank you, everyone.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.